All right, well, I would like to welcome two very special guests to the Complete Advisor. They are industry insider experts. So normally on the podcast so far that we've had conversations, for the most part with advisors. And what is fascinating is we're going to have a conversation with two people who actually go inside the offices of probably hundreds of the most successful advisors in the country. I'll introduce you left to right from me, Julie Harkins, and then Patrick Butcher. You both work for perhaps one of the largest insurance companies in North America. I don't know if we say the name or not, but I think that's probably pretty good clue right there. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Julie, tell us, we'll just start. So, the overarching conversation point that I'd like to talk about is really what you see, what you and Patrick see. Because again, you get to see this, you have this unique perspective year over year. You get to meet with the top advisors in the United States. And there has got to be, what I want to ask you, the two of you, is what do you see that separates those top offices from those offices that do pretty good? Because that's one thing that I've seen is that there are advisors that are very talented, very good, and they seem like they plateau. And it's almost like I don't know if it's a self-imposed glass ceiling or what it is, but I have to imagine, do you see that? And before you even answer that, tell us a little bit about you. Just what do you do out there for the industry, and a little background. Totally on the spot.
There we go. Well, thank you, Dennis. Happy to be here. So a little bit about myself. I've had the opportunity to work at that insurance carrier for almost a decade now. Mm-hmm. So as you mentioned, 100% accurate. I've been going out into our top producers' offices for about 7 years of that 10, and have the privilege of meeting with people who do $5 million in the industry to just recently this year. One of my top producers I support is hoping to hit $100 million in the industry. So obviously there's quite a trajectory there between the two numbers. And at one point, he happened to be that $5 million producer. So seeing that journey.
Yeah.
That's a broad question, and maybe I'll break it down into a couple different segments, and then obviously let my colleague comment as well. So there's characteristics. So if I were to do an overarching theme, I would say focus on, what you do best. And based off of your personality as an agent or an advisor, you're going to have to define that and refine it. And hopefully, your partners in the industry help you do that. Mm-hmm. And some of the best ways, or I tend to gravitate, one of the best ways that I saw an office do this is they do quarterly reflections. And they specifically create a grid. And in that grid, there's, a category, what do I like to do? What do I not like to do? What am I good at? And what am I not good at? Mm-hmm. And they simply list out their day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, operations or what they do. So whether that's meeting with clients, client referrals, following up on transfers, what does that look like, whether you're that $5 million or that, $50 million producer. And then you go through and you start to see, where's your time spent most. But then furthermore, go through and circle everything on that grid that is revenue generating.
Yeah.
And the first thing you want to do, whether you have staff or don't have staff, you might consider getting some, is try to eliminate the things, or at least your time spent on the things that for sure you don't like to do and you're not good at, so the bottom quadrant, but then secondly, that aren't revenue generating. And if you start doing that, I would say regularly in the offices, the one that I'm speaking of that does this, I think that they saw their practice go from like that 5 million to, I think it's a group of 3 now. They do north of 50, and they have staff that they've hired. But that was kind of like one of the first things where they really kind of self-reflected. So, to step away from the business and work on the business versus at it.
A lot of producers, this is one thing that I've learned through the years is a lot of producers, they miss the fact that they are small business owners, they are entrepreneurs. And so they don't sometimes think about their practice that way. Now, I do have to bring this gentleman into the conversation. Patrick, we left you sitting there for just a second. Okay, so Patrick Butcher, so you're working with this major insurance company. How long have you been doing it? A little bit about your role.
Yeah, so I've been at this insurance company for 8 years now. And similar to Julie, I've had the opportunity for the last 7 to work with our top advisors around the country, go into their offices, see what's working, what's not working, and how they've been able to scale and grow their businesses as well.
Nice. Okay, so one of the things that, Julie, you just mentioned this, and I have 2 brothers that are really big in the industry. And one of them one of the comments he said was simplify and replicate. And then one of the he's got that mantra, which is not, I wish if it was his that he could coin it and trademark it, great, but it's not. But the other thing that he said that kind of flies into a face of a lot of advice that we're given just outside the industry is like, if you're not good at something, just keep working at it until you get good at it. And see, you both shook your head. And that was some thinking that I know that I have been told, find your weak points and work and get those really strong. And what my brother said to me is like, if I'm not good at it, why would I spend any of my time? I'm going to go do what I'm good at because that's revenue generating, and I'll hire somebody. Do you see a lot of people embracing that when you're in those shops and those practices that are, maybe in that 3, 4, 5 where they're kind of bumping on that ceiling? Do you see them embracing that, or do you see like any aha moments?
So I think you're spot on with doing what you do best and then outsourcing the rest, and hiring early is probably the number one thing. Hire before you actually need it, so then when you do need someone for operations or to scale or another advisor, you already have that. And I think that when you do hit that plateau, when we see advisors that have a goal and they haven't gotten there, or they're kind of stuck at that number that they've been hitting for year over year, a lot of the times it's because they're not focusing on what they do best. And to your point, they're trying to do everything. And when they try to do everything, they lose focus on what's actually important, which is meeting with clients, following up with clients, and bringing business in the door. And when they try to get into the operations and the new business and the follow-ups, and they want to grow, that's just not sustainable. So when I see offices that actually are really scaling and growing, I think the biggest thing that makes that occur is scaling and then having a process. You know exactly what you're going to do. The team knows exactly what they're going to do. And it all, combines into growth. And that's the way that I've seen the most success is, having a process, sticking to the process, and then having a team and knowing what each team member's going to be doing to grow and scale that business.
And maybe if I can go back just to one of your kind of comments, questions, Dennis, about whether or not those producers embrace that or whether they realize it. The most successful, I would say, to break through that ceiling, do realize it and do embrace it. But think about this. You said it's your business. You're the entrepreneur. And a lot of times you're the one who built it to that point where you can hire someone or that you need to outsource those duties or responsibilities. And I would say that it's a fairly high number that it's quite difficult for that producer to embrace that moment. It's like you need to have that confidant, whether it's a business partner or your own, whatever it might be, a friend. You need to have someone help you, or some do if they're not willing to. Because truly, you have capacity. Every single person has it. It might be different limits depending on the person. But it's also hard to, kind of kick your baby out of the nest too, or let someone else in the nest. So I think that some embrace it and are able to do it easier than others. And I think some people just need support when that decision kind of hits them and they've always had their hands in everything from meeting with the client to issuing the business to following up.
So you mentioned, I think this is interesting, so I just had the thought on your thought. You mentioned that the having the ability to bounce some of those ideas off somebody. Because one thing that I do remember, so I worked in a captive agency for my dad. Dad, I'm still sorry for wasting your time for those years. I worked with one of my brothers as an advisor. And, one thing that I do remember is it is a little bit lonely because you do kind of feel like you're out there on an island, because it's not like you can talk to the other advisor in town because that's your competition. So do those conversations come up a lot in your role, and yours and Patrick's role in working, having those conversations to help somebody maybe see the forest for the trees?
Yeah, definitely. And Patrick, I welcome you to help support this conversation too. So they by all means come up, and a lot of times, you have a team of individuals that help support producers in the field and help scale the business and grow. So whether it comes to Patrick and I based off of us being in the office in that capacity, or over the phone, or whatever it might be, I would say that sometimes they're fortunate enough to have a confidant in maybe a different city or something that is willing to be that mentor-mentee type relationship. So, but it's also typically like firm-based too. So whether it's the insurance carrier, or whether it's the IMO that's helping them break through that ceiling, or whatever it might be, I do think having someone else to be that confidant is important, because once they break through that ceiling, there's going to be another one sometime in the future. And it's nice knowing that maybe someone who's been there in the past will help you realize or see it in the future, because sometimes it's not always that clear.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons I love my job is, you get to go into all these different offices, and each office is so different than every other office, and they have their own practice and they have their own value add, but you get to hear what problems or difficulties are these offices having, and how have they solved those, and then you can go into other offices, and if they're having the same problems, now you have, I just was with another office that had that problem, and here's what they did, and here's how they solved it. So I think having that person, whether it's, it doesn't matter who it is, but having that person you can bounce ideas off of, is this a good idea, is this a bad idea, should I be spending money here, should I be spending money somewhere else, is extremely important. And then I'd say from the offices that I've seen from scale and grow the most, they spend money on their employees. They spend more than probably what they would want to spend, but having a chief operating officer, having someone in the office that's kind of running the show, what I find is advisors realize quickly they're really good at meeting with clients, but they may not be the best manager, or they may not have enough time or resources to manage everybody on the team, put together the events and all of that. So when you're thinking about the year, where do you want to be and where do you want to go? The best ones are able to outsource or have someone in the office to be able to kind of put all of that together so they can focus on, to Julie's point earlier, revenue generating business.
Maybe one more quick comment. I feel like we keep focusing on the success story, and I want us to make sure that we realize that success includes failure, right? Yeah. So every single one of the offices that we've seen that have broken through that ceiling or experienced the success that they have, they've also embraced failure.
The fail-forward concept.
Yes, and fail fast if you can, right? And then recognize it and learn from it. And so, not to be defeated if you hire a staff member and they don't work out, that doesn't mean that expanding your business and hiring staff, it doesn't work. It means that maybe that wasn't a good fit.
So that's an interesting thought, the fail forward, fail fast. I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you think of any other examples? Because that's an interesting line of thinking, too.
Yeah, one, I think, so here's another. People is definitely one. Events. So I think about COVID and some of the best people who were face-to-face and drove their business through events and human interaction, all of a sudden had to figure out how to do it otherwise.
Absolutely.
And there's someone who comes to mind who tried to transition to virtual events. So he essentially took his seminar in a box and did it virtually. Well, there was something that was successful with him being face-to-face and, charismatic and so on and so forth. When he just repackaged it, it didn't have the same success. And so we were talking, and I suggested, I was like, instead of doing the seminar, what if you do a virtual event that helps you bring that charisma into it? So instead of just straight education, what did people want to feed on during COVID? But the human interaction and the personability of things. They didn't necessarily need a 101 on insurance or whatever. So he started doing virtual chocolate tastings with a chocolatier. And so he invited what he would, so, the referral or the clients that he would to a normal seminar, and then let them invite a friend. He spent $20 to $50. They ended up with a box of chocolates. A chocolatier talked for 20 to 30 minutes. He even took himself out of the spotlight. He had to open, close it, and he got addresses and contact information to send the chocolates and the invites and the follow-up. And he essentially changed his entire educational approach for that environment. Now he's doing both. But yeah, I mean, chocolate tastings, he did wine tastings. It was quite impressive. But he failed. He had that moment of failure on the front end.
And going on events, I think it's important to realize what got you to where you're at, and it's your existing clients. So not forgetting where you came from and who got you there, which is your existing clients, and doing different types of events. There's one office that comes to mind that does like a Veterans Day lunch. It doesn't have to be some extravagant thing. But every Veterans Day, he'll have all of his clients that are veterans come for lunch, and they'll bring friends that are veterans as well. And it's an easy way to, number one, thank them for their service, and two, you get to meet other potential clients that are veterans as well. And it's a thank you, and it's also just a great way to stay connected with the clients as well.
That's interesting. Client events. Let's talk about that for just a second. I happen to know a couple big advisors that don't do them. Is that something, though, common that you see with big advisors that you've gone into that they do? Do you see a lot of client events like that? Not like not that in particular, but just doing client appreciation events.
I do. I mean, Julie, you can add on your thoughts too, but for the big offices that we work with, a lot of them will do either quarterly or maybe it's just an annual type of an event, but they always try to do something with their existing clients. And I think what they found and why they continue to do it is not only are you able to connect and stay with all your existing clients, but they bring friends, you find out new clients, and they get referrals from those as well. So it does, obviously the number one goal is to show appreciation to the existing clients, but when they're bringing friends and they're bringing in new potential clients, that's also a huge benefit.
Yeah, and I mean, by all means, we could probably do a whole segment or podcast on client events. So I do think that a lot of our top producers do them. To maybe bring it back or, thread it back to the beginning and our initial comments, it's what makes sense for you. So I see top producers that do massive client events. And personally, I know that I'm probably better in a smaller, intimate setting. So I also see top producers, one comes to mind who they do birthday lunches. So if a client's having a birthday or breakfast, they do as well, but they will allow them to invite, call it 8 to 10 of their close friends, and they'll buy them lunch or breakfast. And so when they show up, there's, flowers, balloons, whatever it might be. And the advisor simply calls them right when they get to the reservation to say, how does the table look? Are your friends there? Did everything, meet expectations? And then typically, the best part is all the friends, and they're like, who? Who was that? Who put this on? Yeah. And in that same capacity.
Even retirement parties, too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that, again, what makes sense for you, whether it's the big ones, which show great success, or if it's a more intimate one or different, it's kind of that uniqueness and doubling down on your strengths, I think.
Would there be, just out for curiosity, would there be one where you thought that you've heard of where you're just like, what in the heck?
So I could say from a female perspective, there was someone who was doing a Valentine's Day event for women, whether they were single or had a significant other. And initially I was like, really? I feel like I want to spend Valentine's Day maybe with my significant other. But then I also thought about it and I was like, I have kids now. And I'm like, you know what? Getting together with a bunch of ladies, drinking wine, having a masseuse on site, and furthermore, I'm sure my spouse would love it if they didn't have to have the pressure of what we were going to do on Valentine's Day.
That's a fact.
So it ended up being significantly more successful than when I first heard about it. I was like, I don't know if this is going to hit home or not.
Yeah, I think for me, the one that comes to mind is there's a couple of offices that do a client event for people that have all owned the same product. And at first, I was like, this sounds, number one, kind of a little corny, and two, I just don't know if this is going to work. And what they do is they'll have everyone come in, they'll go kind of just high level, like a market update, and then they'll go high level over just making sure, you're familiar, understand the product that they're in and the benefit and the value of that. And each office is completely different, right? So there's some that, are managing assets, some are just insurance only, but it boggled my mind when I saw that there was an advisor that brought in $3 million of revenue or $3 million of business from existing clients that already had products, and it was just the same people that owned the product are coming in for a client event dinner. And initially when I heard that, I was like, really? Is that gonna work? And it did. And a lot of people do it now.
That is an interesting idea. The Valentine's thing I'd never heard of. And I thought I'd heard of just about everything. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think similar to whether it's Veterans Day or the product one, there's something about the mob mentality, right? The commonality. Yeah. So you bring these people together, and whether they share the same, like giving back and being in the service, or whether they share the same, they all purchase the same product, and they got validated by the fact that they're in this room and 50 other people also purchased this product, and then they remind themselves why they bought it, and all of a sudden you're in a market condition where it's like, wow, that made total sense. It's working how we thought it was going to work. I actually do have more assets. So I think that commonality and everyone kind of validating who they are or that similar. Yeah.
And we all want to belong. We all want to be. We all want to be, no matter how. The fact that we are in a country of rugged individuals, we do want to be part of something, right. and it feels good. So let's pivot though. So we've talked about the successful.
Yes.
How about, you don't have to, I'm naturally not, don't name anybody or anything like that, but
Dennis matter.
what have you so think just a little bit, ponder this, of offices you've gone into where you've seen things just totally apparent to you, where you're just like, okay, wait a second, I can help this guy, I can help this gal, but man, that's, sometimes there are things that are just, you can't see because it's like right here where somebody else walks into the office and like, oh, you got to change that. Anything pop into your head? I'm totally putting you on the spot though.
I mean, first thing that comes to my mind is there's an office that I won't name the name, but and back in the day, they would get way too into the weeds. They'd have like 3-hour meetings, and then
with clients.
And right away, I'm like, okay, like we're getting too much in. If you're going 3 hours, there's no client that wants to sit in a 3-hour meeting with a financial advisor. And then I think the other thing that I've seen is going back to kind of what we were talking about earlier. You have a process, and you do what you do best. When there's advisors that try to do everything, you're doing everything mediocre if you're not focusing on what you're doing the best. And so when they try to do everything, they get distracted, and then they're not focusing on what they're actually is making them money and growing their business. So I think that's probably the most common one that I see, is just too many. They're getting involved in too many things where they need to stay focused on what they're best at, and then have the team do the other things that would allow them to grow the business.
Yep. So piggybacking off of that, I tend to be, I'm someone who really likes personality studies. I think that if you can identify someone's personality or lead personality traits, you can connect with them faster. You can have a stronger connection. And so I think about, and I'm at fault of this. I happen to have a team underneath me. I would love more than anything to hire the exact same person on my team that arguably has similar traits as myself, because we think alike, we execute alike, and it just makes life easy. But the other side of that, and so back to the advisor question, is it's almost arguably one of the best things you can do for yourself is diversify your team or the people who surround you. So whether that's even clients too, and at client events, is if I know my strengths, clearly if you have the same strengths and we work like this, we have a significant weakness in certain areas. And then the other thing is when we evaluate each other, we're going to think we're the bee's knees, right? Because we're fabulous at this.
We are doing awesome.
But if you bring someone in who's arguably the opposite of us, they're going to have that different vantage point and be like, you know what, you're really hitting it with the clients who are direct and who are this, but these clients who are a little more touchy-feely and need this aspect, you're kind of falling hard, and that's maybe not why you're closing those ones. And so bringing kind of that either thought process or diversity within personality traits into your business, I think is important as well.
Do you see any commonalities of in practices that just aren't, that are just hitting that glass ceiling? Do you see any where you're just like, gosh, you're just shooting yourself in the foot?
I think distraction. The top offices that we work with, it's quarterly, or they have an annual kind of ROC planning. So ROCs meaning here are the main 3-4 things that we want to get done this quarter or this year, and that's all that they're striving for. Is everything they're doing is to make sure that these ROCs or goals are completed. The ones that kind of hit that glass ceiling or are not growing and taking it to the next level, it's because they're not focusing, or maybe they're not taking the time prior to say, what are the 3 or 4 goals that we want to make sure as a team we hit this year? Yeah. And if they're not planning ahead or they're not putting that on paper and writing it down and have the goal and the whole team knows it, they get distracted, they're in different areas, and they don't really know what is success. And if you don't know what is success and you don't have those goals, then you just keep doing the same thing over and over. So I'd say, that comes to my mind is the kind of the rock planning. I'm blanking on the book that it's based on, but there's a leadership book where it's based on rocks. We actually do it at our company as well, where each quarter we'll list out the rocks that we want to make sure we complete to make us successful for that quarter. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing for advisors too. What do you want to accomplish? Here are the rocks. How are we going to get there? And then every day this is what we're striving for, and the whole team is in on it. When you don't have that and you don't know what you're trying to get to, you're all over the place.
That's a good point. All the horses are pulling in a different direction a little bit.
Yep.
What do you think, Julie?
I would agree with that, and I think an important component of that is we grade ourselves. So, if you underneath the rocks, we have pebbles that help us execute or achieve that goal, mm-hmm. and then we make sure that we put those in front of us visually and verbally every, call it 1 to 2 weeks, and we go through a rock or whatever it might be. But then at the end of the quarter, we grade ourselves. We think that if we get 100% and achieved everything, our rocks were too easy. We did the layup. You want to kind of be in, call it the 70 to 80%, so you know that you were challenging yourself, but you still achieved and strived some things. But you definitely don't want to be in the, call it 50 to 60%, because you're probably challenging yourself, but you're also probably distracted.
Well, and what it does is if when you do the review, and advisors that are practicing this, it allows them to go through and say, here's where we are doing good at, and here's our weaknesses, and how can we, if we didn't complete this rock, why not? And then how do we get it for the next quarter? So it gives you tangible things that you're focused on and what you need to improve on as well.
That is a really big point. But it's so easy. That's one thing that I remember is it's so easy to be. There's so many things that you feel, especially starting out, that you feel like you have to do. It's almost like you're herding cats forward, and you're just trying to move the ball a little bit. And then what ends up happening is you gravitate towards gosh, I'm moving all these things forward, but I can do this. I can get this one thing. I can get this done today. Yep. But this thing doesn't make me any money. But I need to do it sooner or later, but I can get it done today, and that feels good because I was able to chop something off the list. But that's fascinating. Julie, I cut you off. I'm so sorry.
No, I was just going to say one other thing, and this is completely kind of off or pivoting to the initial question, but different route, is as hard as this maybe is to say and probably even harder to do, I think that sometimes people who hit ceilings or maybe are trying to break through to the next level get caught up in emotions. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of emotion around you owning your own business. So just because you have a best friend that needs a job, or a brother or a sister or a niece or a nephew, I mean, you said it, you grew up in the business with family members.
Whoa, personal. I make the jokes about my slacker attitude back in the day.
I'm not saying it was
right.
successful,
right.
And some of the best practices are within families or friends or things like that. And and even beyond that, let's say you hire a stranger, but over a 5-year period you become great friends, but you realize they might be in, right person, wrong seat. And it's try not to make business decisions in an emotional mindset. And again, I think it's extremely hard to separate that. But at the end of the day, you're probably not only, valuing your business to be able to provide for your family or others or whatever, but by making business decisions based off the business, I think you're going to be able to get to that next level.
That's a really good point.
And I'd even add on to that and say, you look at every office and every market's a little different. And so when an advisor, sometimes they get distracted with, oh, this advisor's doing that and it's working. Yeah. Well, what you're doing is working, but they'll try to bring in another marketing funnel when they haven't really mastered the one they're doing yet.
Yes.
And so the ones that do go to that next level, they'll double down on what's working. And then once they have that down and there's no questions, they know exactly what they're going to get. They know their ROI, they know their numbers, which is another big thing is knowing the numbers. Then they can try to go into a different, marketing funnel. But when they do it too quickly and they try to jump into different ideas, and if it doesn't work right away, they stop and go do something else. Then you lose. You're not going to be successful, and you're not doubling down on actually what's making you money.
Yeah. That's, what you said and what you said, so brilliant, both of you. The family and that part, I personally am always in awe every time when I run into a practice where it's family or spouses, and it's really, really working really, really well. Like I'll pull up a seat and like tell me about it because I have to apologize to my own family. They probably both should have fired me repeatedly, but so I learned a lot. Fail forward,
Yeah.
But that's I've seen that. I have seen that in some practices where there is somebody who if their blank wasn't the boss, they wouldn't be working.
Yep.
And you're right, because it is the emotion of it. You have to back out and think of what's best for the practice, because it's not just about you as an advisor. You've actually built something now where you have clients that are depending upon you, and you have other staff that you really are making this small world. And you have to protect that world and make decisions that are the best. And unfortunately, if you have to send your son packing, that's what Dad should have did.
I think arguably, if you're able to come to it in a level-headed sense, usually you're doing each other a favor.
Yep.
Right?
Yep,
Kind of
that's
doubling
true.
down on those strengths and things like that. But especially when family's involved, more than likely the stress that you're bringing together is also causing stress or, emotions on
True.
Both sides.
work life or extended family, No one
100%.
wants to talk about the business at the turkey dinner or whatever.
And it happened every year.
Yeah.
Every year we talk about life insurance at the old family in the Mattern house, talking about life and annuities.
That sounds like a hell of a Thanksgiving dinner, Dennis.
Actually, now it sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. At the time when I wasn't selling anything, it wasn't so great. It was a different time. But so that the interesting thing about hiring people and in practices, do you see? So you're seeing it now. So you've both been doing this for a while. So you're doing it pre-COVID. You're doing it post. I keep hearing that people are talking about hiring and finding the qualified candidate. Are you seeing that in practices right now when you're stopping through offices?
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt me, Patrick, but I want to give an example. This kind of blew my mind. I went into an office, and a successful office, and so one thing you had mentioned, Patrick, I think people pay and overpay. So it costs, and it costs a lot to get, number one, hire a staff member, number two, train them, but then to hopefully retain them. There's a lot of value and cost to that. But the value on the back end of having to not have to do it again, especially for that position in a year or 3 years or whatever that might be, is extremely high. So making sure everybody understands that. I went into an office that said that they have, annual goals, and they break them off as, here's our goal, here's our stretch goal, super stretch, whatever it might be. And as they achieve each goal, they get something else. So whether it's a spot bonus.
Sure.
But the interesting part was that the receptionist got the same bonus as the senior sub advisor. So whether that was a $5,000 bonus or a $25,000 bonus, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And he happened to say, he goes, you know what it means for her to get basically like 25% of her paycheck?
Sure.
And let me tell you, there's no one who smiles bigger, knows more birthdays, But furthermore, it still makes for sense for the senior sub too, who's also driven on, other revenue targets. But so I think overpaying, as hard as it is, will pay off in the long run. But then also having those people who might be more support staff involved in the sale process and the success of sales. I mean, the amount of referrals that he alone gets from his staff is pretty impressive.
We are, as soon as this podcast is over, this whole overpay conversation. You and I and Patrick, we're going to walk into my boss's office, and I want you to repeat every word that you just said about overpaying and the importance of overpaying. But it is a good it's a great concept, because shameless plug for one of the other podcast episodes, we talk about building a winning team. We have an advisor that has his team is just so tight, and everybody, just like you talked about, everyone knows the goals. They all work together. The benefits, the perks, and all that are great, but everybody is pulling in the same direction. And to have from the front staff to the back really, really care and want to succeed because they have a reason for it, instead of, just a 9 to 5 punch the clock. But there's something there. If they give more, they get more, and that's important.
100%.
Well, I think it's easier said than done, but if you can find the right person in the office to kind of be that champion of, whether it's a chief operating officer, whatever the title is.
Sure.
You don't have to be as involved in all of the hiring and all of the day-to-day operations if you find that right person that can help with, the hiring and the day-to-day and what you should be doing. And that just frees up time for the advisor to have meetings with clients with what they're supposed to be doing. Now, it's not as easy to find that perfect person to be able to do all that, but if you look, that's kind of the one thing that I've seen from people, the offices that really have scaled, is they have that person in the office, whatever the title is, operating officer, chief marketing officer, that kind of runs that day-to-day show, so the advisors don't have to get into the weeds with that, and they can focus on meeting with clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we'll kind of bring this, there's questions I want to ask you that would be unfair because you can't answer them, and because you'd be not naming names but telling some great stories. So we'll talk about that maybe over an adult beverage and
Sign me up.
We'll sign non-disclosures, and you can tell me some of the craziest things you've seen. And but as you look, so put on your Punxsutawney Phil hats here. Let's do some prognosticating. We'll say some big words here. But as you look 12 months ahead, over the next 12 months, what do you see for advisors that excites you? What do you see as things that concern you? That's really wide open, so there's no right or wrong answer. But Julie, what do you think?
So I tend to be a power positive thinking person. So I'm going to go with the maybe concerning side of things first. So probably what concerns me, our industry is constantly changing. We've seen that. You'd be able to share some great stories over the years of what that looks like and what you've experienced. So the things that concern me are people who don't embrace change. Typically, there's leadership at our company that says, their quote is, the toothpaste is out of the tube. So a lot of things, whether it's regulatory, whether it's technology, whether it's, the working environment, you think of like COVID, virtual, face-to-face. Typically, when the toothpaste is out of the tube or that change presents itself, it's probably not going back. So I would say as difficult as it is, embrace the change, jump on board as fast as you can, and then figure out how to really capitalize on it. So the thing that concerns me, and especially those successful advisors who aren't willing to see that or embrace it. The thing that excites me the most, and frankly, I would just say we're in a very favorable environment, in my opinion, from financial services. There's a ton of people out there who need help, who need advice. And frankly, I don't think there'll ever be a time, people have talked about the robo-advisor. I don't view that as a threat. I think that this is always going to be the preferred avenue. And I think that we all have an opportunity to double down on that.
Nice.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head.
No, you have to say something different. You cannot agree with her, not at all.
I think economically, there's a lot of things that can happen over the next 12 months, and that can also be an opportunity. One thing that comes to mind more planning-wise is tax planning and Roth conversions, and what does that look like down the road? Where are tax rates going? I think that's a big opportunity from a planning aspect. And then to Julie's point, I think just everything has changed and with COVID and post-COVID, and over the next 12 months, embracing technology. If you're, kind of using technology, but you're still doing a lot of manual things, you can become a lot more efficient by embracing change, embracing technology, looking at what else is out there. And yeah, I think this is the best time to be in the industry. There's so much opportunity. There's so many people retiring, and there's so many people that need our help. So it's just an exciting time to be in the industry, Dennis.
Nice. I could not agree more, and I love what as I'm wrapping the episode, but man, you both said some stuff there that we could just unpack for like another hour or two. But we're going to save that for another time. I would like to coax you back on. Hopefully this was a good experience. We had a good time.
Fabulous.
We'll be back.
Good. There's things that I would definitely like to talk about in the industry, on things that you see. There's just so much to talk about. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. We look forward to having you on here again.
Perfect.
Appreciate you having us.
Thanks for having us.
This podcast is for financial professional use only and not for use with the general public. The information provided is the exclusive property of Creative One and is protected by copyright and other intellectual property laws of the United States. This material has been prepared for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to provide, and should not be relied upon for, accounting, legal, tax or investment advice. Creative One is not responsible for the results of programs discussed on this podcast or any liability stemming from the use of it. Although we may promote or recommend the services offered by this company, agents are ultimately responsible for the use of any materials or services and agree to comply with the compliance requirements of their broker-dealer and registered investment advisor, if applicable, and the insurance carriers they represent. Copyright 2022, Creative One Marketing Corporation.